Okay, hello students. So today let us discuss about the physiology of micturation, and then we will discuss about what we call as neurogenic bladder and what are the types. So before going into the neurogenic bladder, it will be better for us if we can just understand the physiology of micturation. So when we start, or when you go into the details of micturation, we have to know about the different organs or the structures responsible for this whole process. So as you can see here, these are the pair of kidneys. Then the kidneys are connected to the bladder by the ureters, and the bladder retains the urine, or when it is filled up we void the urine, and the bladder continues down as a urethra where the urine passes outside, and this urethra here, as you can see, is passing on to the a muscular structure in a male called penis, and we have two pairs of sphincters that controls the in and out of the urine. That is the pair of internal sphincter and the external sphincter. The external sphincter, where it is, this area is called the urogenital diaphragm, and the function is to contract or relax as per the need of retention or voiding the urine. So as you can see, this structure of a male urinary system, if we also see the female bladder, same thing, we have a pair of kidneys, ureters, the bladder, but here we don't have the internal sphincter. Instead we have only the external sphincter, and the urethra is short in structure, and maybe that is the reason why, because of the short urethra and because of no internal sphincter system, the females are more prone to urinary tract infections. So okay, now let us look at the receptors which are present and which function or coordinate with the higher centers of the brain in this whole process of micturation. So here we have one important muscular structure that is called the detrusor muscle. The detrusor muscle or the detrusor muscle is a smooth muscle, and since it is a muscle, it has the property of contraction and relaxation, which helps in retention or voiding the urine or the urinary or the urine output. So we have basically the muscarinic receptor present in the detrusor muscle, that is the M3. Then we have the beta adrenergic receptor B3. Then we have the alpha 1 adrenergic receptor, which is present in the internal sphincter, and we have the nicotinic receptor which is present in the external sphincter. So these are the receptors basically which you find in the urinary system. Then now these receptors are in coordination with the higher centers of the brain and the spinal cord, and this functions in a coordinated manner in the retention or the voiding of the urine. So here you can see the brain, the higher centers, the midbrain, pons and the medulla. And the pons is very important here because the micturating center is located in the pons. Then we have this cervical region, thoracic, lumbar and the sacral region of the spinal cord. So for us to understand easily, let us classify. Basically you have to understand that there are three systems working the nervous system. First is the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nerves originate from the thoracolumbar region, that is from T11 to L2 region. The preganglionic fibers enters this ganglion complex and they come out as a postganglionic fibers giving result to the hypogastric sympathetic nerve. Then come to the parasympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nerves, which are present in the sacral region of the spinal cord, and they are mainly from the S2, S3 and S4. They originate as the pelvic nerve, that is the parasympathetic pelvic nerve, and we have the somatic nerves, which we call the pudendal nerve, that also originates from the sacral region. So basically we have three: the sympathetic, that is the originates from the thoracolumbar area, and the preganglionic nerve fibers enters this ganglion complex and then come out as the postganglionic fibers giving rise to the hypogastric, that is the sympathetic nerve. Then we have the parasympathetic pelvic nerve originating from the sacral region, and then from the sacral region another nerve comes, that is the pudendal nerve, which is the somatic nerve. The sympathetic nerve, which originates from the thoracolumbar area, which gives rise to the hypogastric nerve, has an neurotransmitter noradrenaline, which goes and binds with the B3 receptor of the Detrusor muscle in the bladder and stimulates it, and this stimulation results in the relaxation of the Detrusor muscle. Also, the hypogastric nerve 1N binds with the alpha 1 receptor of the internal sphincter, and here the stimulation results in the contraction of the internal sphincter. So in the alpha 1 receptor, it results in the contraction, so that is a positive effect. And in the detrusor muscle B3 stimulation, it gives the relaxation of the detrusor muscle, that is a negative minus effect. The pelvic nerve, that is the parasympathetic, which is not in our control, has the acetylcholine, which binds on the AM3 receptor, and the stimulation of the AM3 receptor results in contraction of the detrusor muscle. That is why we have given a plus sign. And the second sacral nerve, that is the pudendal nerve, the somatic nerve, which is under our control, also it has the acetylcholine, and it goes and binds with the receptor called the nicotinic receptor, and this stimulation also results in the contraction of the external sphincter. So we can say that firing the pudendal nerve or firing our pudendal nerve, contraction of the external sphincter, is that it helps in holding our urine. So we can say that the hypogastric sympathetic nervous system helps in urine retention, that is by relaxation of the bladder and filling of the urine, and the parasympathetic, which contracts the bladder muscle, helps in voiding of the urine. There is a fourth nerve, that is the sensory pelvic nerve, afferent nerve, which comes from the detrusor muscle to the sacral region, and when the bladder is stressed, when the bladder is filled with urine, when it is stressed, it is stimulated. So, if the bladder is not full or there is a small amount of urine collected, there is not much stretching of the bladder muscle. So the sensory pelvic nerve will send slow sensory impulses towards the spinal cord, that is the sacral region, and it will stimulate the hypogastric nerve, that is the sympathetic nerve, and then it will relax the detrusor muscle and it will contract the internal sphincter. Okay. Anyways, the brain and the pons know when we have an empty bladder and send signals to the thoracic level to stimulate the hypogastric nerve. So the brain and the pons know that when we have an empty bladder and send signals to the thoracic level to stimulate the hypogastric nerve, and so that we can retain the urine. It also sends some signals to the sacral level to stimulate the pelvic afferent nerve, and which is inhibited at this level. The pelvic afferent nerve is inhibited. The pudendal nerve is stimulated, which binds with the nicotinic receptor and results in the contraction of the external sphincter. So whenever there is a small amount of urine collected in the bladder, the local reflex is functioning, and the brain sends us signals, and the hypogastric and the pudendal nerve all together, they will try to relax the bladder, contract the external sphincter, so that urine is retention, and anytime we do not void. When the bladder is full, or when we have a full bladder, there is the stretching of the detrusor muscle, and with this stretch, the sensory nerve, that is the pelvic nerve, efferent nerve, which comes down to the sacral region, increases, or it gives us fast signals, lot of impulses. It sends lot of impulses to the sacral region. Now when it is full and when there is lot of impulses coming fast, the sacral region, it goes up, then the impulses go up, it bypasses the thoracolumbar area and directly enters to the pontine micturation center, which stimulates the neuron there, thereby inhibiting the hypogastric nerve. So when the hypogastric nerve is inhibited, that means there is no relaxation of the detrusor muscle, and also there is no function of the alpha 1 receptor. So there is relaxation of the internal sphincter. Also, the pontine micturation center stimulates the pelvic efferent nerve, which results in the contraction of detrusor muscle by working on the M3 receptor. Also, it inhibits the pudendal nerve, so that there is no contraction of external sphincter and it is relaxed, so that urine is moving out. We can void the urine and urine goes out. So whenever there is a voiding, there is a local reflex, that is the loop. When the bladder is full, it stretches. When it is stretched, the efferent pelvic nerve is stimulated, it comes to the sacral region, there is an interneuron, it synapses, and then from there the pelvic nerve goes and it relaxes the sphincters, and the urine is moved out or voiding takes place. So this is a loop, that cycle that takes place. So we must understand that the pudendal nerve of the sacral region, there is stimulation of the external sphincter, retention of urine in the bladder. The hypogastric nerve is responsible for inhibition of the detrusor contraction and stimulates the sphincter, that is filling of the bladder. So till now we have understood this. There is a local reflex. When the sensory fibers, when any amount of urine is collected, it stimulates the sensory fibers, then it reaches the spinal cord. So normally the given motor efferent for contraction should be there, but because of the higher center inhibition, the small amount of filling does not lead to the emptying of the bladder. Only when the bladder gets full, the mechanism takes place. So what happens when there is a spinal cord injury? The injury may be in the higher centers, above or below. So if it is an upper motor neural lesion, then the higher the centers that controls the higher controlling centers are gone. that is not effective. Only the local reflex is working. So any amount of urine collected in the bladder will get emptied, because the inhibition that comes from the higher centers is not functioning now because of the injury in the spinal cord. So any amount of urine collected will get emptied and the bladder will be emptying. So the bladder muscle will be overactivated, hypertrophied and spastic, which is also known as the automatic bladder, and incontinence type is seen in the upper motor neuron lesion. Suppose now if the injury is down or below that is the lower motor neuron, in the S2, S3, S4 or the sacral lesion is injured, or below T12L, below the lumbar region, then the local reflex stops functioning. So what will happen if the local reflex is stopped? The bladder will keep on filling. It will send sensory signals, but the bladder will not be emptied as the parasympathetic nerve function is not functioning. So this type of bladder is called the autonomous bladder, or where there is loss of tone, or also known as the atonic bladder, that is the lower motor neuron lesion. So if we see the differences between two, if we classify between the upper motor neuron and the lower motor neuron lesion of the bladder, in upper motor neuron, as I said, you will see a hyperactive or overactive bladder, that is a spastic bladder. In lower motor, it will be flaccid bladder because the local reflex is not functioning. The tone of the upper motor neuron lesion in this case will be hypertonic. In lower motor neuron, it will be hypotonic, hypo. If you see the volume of the bladder in upper motor neuron lesion, the volume of the bladder may be normal or small volume, and the volume of the bladder in lower motor neuron lesion will increase. If you see the muscle activity, the detrusor activity in upper motor, as I said, the higher centers are not functioning, so the bladder cannot be empty, the local reflex is functioning only, so it will be again and again emptying of the bladder. So overactivity, involuntary, intermittent contraction, overactivity will be seen. But in lower motor neuron lesions, the activity will be absent or underactivity or low. The pressure in the upper motor neuron lesion bladder will be high. The pressure in the lower motor lesion will be low. Now the incontinence in upper motor neuron lesion will be like urge, because the bladder will be emptying frequently. And in lower motor neuron lesion there will be a overflow type of incontinence, because the bladder will get filled and filled, it will increase in size, but as the local reflex is not there, the voiding is not there, so there will be overflow. So till now I hope we have understood the basic physiology and functioning of the urinary tract system in coordination with the spinal cord and the higher centers, and what happens in an injury, in the spinal cord injury or any trauma, or after an accident, spinal cord injury. It depends on the lesion, which is above the thoracolumbar area or it is below, or whether it is upper motor neuron type or lower motor neuron type. It is upper motor neuron type, then the higher centers will not be functioning. Only the spinal reflex will be functioning, and if it is the lower motor neuron region, then the spinal reflex will be gone. So we have seen both the cases. So if we in a nutshell, if you see the take home, the organs responsible are the kidneys, then we have the connection ureter, the bladder have the detrusor muscle, it is continuous as the urethra, and in male there is another structure between the internal and the external sphincters, that is the prostate. And sometimes if there is some anomaly with the prostate or the prostate hyperplasia or hypertrophy, then it results in the problem in urination. And in case of female, as we have seen, the same thing, but there is no internal sphincter and the urethra is small. So because of the short urethra, there is a high chance of urinary tract infection. We have the receptors, the muscarinic receptor present in the musculature of the bladder, that is M3. You have the beta adrenergic receptor B3. We have the alpha 1 adrenergic receptor. Then you have the nicotinic receptor, which are present in the internal and the external sphincters level. And then the coordination between these the bladder control and the spinal cord and the higher centers, we have three systems, that is the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and the somatic. The sympathetic, that is it originates from the thoracolumbar region. It enters the preganglionic fibers enters the ganglion complex, and it comes out as the post ganglionic fibers, giving result to the sympathetic hypogastric nerve, which has the neurotransmitter noradrenaline, and it binds with the B3 of the detrusor muscle. It relaxes the detrusor muscle, so we have given negative effect, and it binds with the alpha 1 of the internal sphincter, where it contracts the sphincter, so we give a positive effect. Then we have the parasympathetic pelvic nerve, which originates from the sacral region, S2, S3, S4. It has the acetylcholine, binds with the M3 receptor, contracts, it mainly contracts the detrusor muscle. It helps in voiding the urine. And also we have the second, the pudendal nerve, the somatic nerve, which is under our control, also binds with the external sphincter, which contracts, and it helps in holding our urine. So the sympathetic nervous system, it helps in the urine retention, that is the hypogastric nerve, and the parasympathetic nervous system, it helps in voiding of the urine. And the sensory nerve, which comes from the detrusor muscle to the sacral region, when the bladder is stretched, it functions according to the stretch, it is stimulated. When the bladder is not much full, there are slow impulses and slow sensory impulses towards the spinal cord, towards the sacral region, and it stimulates the hypogastric nerve of the thoracic and the lumbar area, which relaxes the detrusor muscle and which contracts the alpha 1 receptor. And when the bladder is full, or when there is more urine in the bladder, then there are fast signals that is increasing in the firing of fast signals, and a lot of impulses are fired to the sacral region and to the spinal cord. The sacral region sends impulses to the spinal cord higher above, bypassing the thoracolumbar area, and directly enters the pontine micturation center, whereby they stimulate the neuron there, inhibiting the hypogastric nerve. So there is no relaxation of the detrusor muscle and no functioning. of the alpha 1 receptor, ultimately resulting in the relaxation of the internal sphincter. Also, it stimulates the pelvic efferent nerve, that is, it contracts the detrusor muscle by working on the M3 receptor, and also it inhibits the pudendal nerve, so there is no contraction of the external sphincter, it is relaxed and there is voiding takes place. So I hope we have got some idea about the basic physiology of micturation and what are the types of neurogenic bladder, the spastic and the flaccid, and what are both type depends on the type of injury. And we have also seen some of the characteristics of the bladder of UMN and LMN. As I said, that if it is upper motor neuron lesion, then the higher centers are gone, only the spinal, the local reflex is working, so any amount of urine collected will get emptied again and again. The bladder goes for emptying, that is, the bladder muscle goes for overactivation, hypertrophied and spastic, so it is called as the automatic bladder, and incontinence is seen in this type of lesion. And in case of lower motor neuron, that is when the sacral lesion, the S2 STS4 local reflex is gone, then the bladder will keep on filling, it will send sensory signals, but as the higher centers are active but the reflex or the lower centers are not working, so the bladder will get filled but there will be no emptying, and because the parasympathetic nervous system will not be functioning, so it is called as the autonomous bladder. That will be loss of tone, or it is also called as the atonic bladder. So once again, thank you for listening to this video, and any doubts, any questions are most welcome. Any suggestions, please feel free to discuss in our WhatsApp group or the Google Classroom. So take care. Bye bye.